This seminar came to be because last week I was at a very wonderful non-dual teacher seminar, and someone was asking about pain and his dismissiveness about it, which may have been absolutely appropriate, but was so difficult for as someone who goes through pain. There are a lot of messages that say, "Oh, if you just think enough happy thoughts, your pain should go away." And if you just could, change everything about yourself, your pain would go away, or everything about your outlook and your way of doing things. So I'm in my 10th year of chronic pain, and the first 2 or 3 months, I tried to meditate it away um, with absolutely no success at all. And that was disappointing because I was certain if I could just be spiritual enough, the pain would, roll off me like water down a mountain. But it didn't. And um, the desire to make the pain go away dominated the next several years of my life. And so when I listened to this gentleman talking, asking for a context to understand his pain, and just hearing that, oh, it's just ignorance, it's just a bad choice. And it's like, well, how do we make a better choice? What is a better choice? And it took everything I had not to jump into trying to talk to this guy during the seminar. I believe that pain is an invitation. And when it's not the most appealing invitation, I will acknowledge. Um, and I want to tell a story. When I was a teenager, I used to work at the backstage gate of a music festival that was the summer home of the Detroit Symphony Orchestra. And so every day or twice a week for these concerts, the musicians would come in and out, and I got to know them all, at least by face and wave. And one afternoon, the flute and oboe said, Lisa, we get together after the concerts every weekend in the parking lot. You should join us. And I was a teenager, right? So as they walked away, I thought, a party with the symphony. Like, what are we going to do? Drink warm milk and listen to Mozart? Like, it was not an appealing invitation as an 18-year-old. And then a few weeks later, I had left something at the gate, and as I went to go get it, I saw, oh, they really are in the parking lot having a party. I'm going to stop in. And oh my gosh, were they having a party? Like, they really knew how to have a convivial, great time in this parking lot with their cars set up to make a really intimate, fun environment. And I was shocked. And the principal oboe looked at me and he goes, Lisa, a band's a band. Just because we're playing classical music doesn't mean we're not musicians. So, and that invitation and going to that party, I met so many people, not just the performers, but also people from the community who were big supporters, that I went on to have really close friendships with. They had bonfires. They were really an active group of people. And it was my taking that invitation that was my entree into that group. And for many years, I have many happy memories with that group. And so I tell the story just to suggest that sometimes an invitation that doesn't seem compelling and the instant that we receive it really may have a lot to offer if we are willing to step into what it's inviting us to. And so I have that context with pain because turning our attention to it, um, it's a choice that is somewhat daunting to make. When I first started to think, I can't fix this, no matter how hard I try. So how else can I approach it? And began, instead of me trying to fix the pain, to maybe allow for the opportunity that the pain was trying to fix me. And a lot really opened up for me when that happened. Because I had, one of the first things I did to try to fix my pain was, change my diet, right? And I would joke that this disease made me fulfill all my New Year's resolutions that I'd been making for decades, but not actually acting on. Spending more time with family and friends, slowing down, eating better, all of these things. And I would joke about that. But then when I made that shift into my body being my teacher, that, that my body was on my side and that I was like an acorn, right? And my body understood how to become an oak tree. And my mind had this absolute insistence that we had to grow in these very specific directions, um, that didn't take into account the fullness of nature. And so as I decided, okay, my body probably knows more than I do, and I'm going to surrender as often as I can to the mandates of my physical experience. So if my physical experience says I'm not getting out of bed today and there's something that I really wanted to do, I would say, oh, clearly not supposed to do that. Clearly not, okay, this is in charge, not my idea of what should be. That was a really, really quantum decision. I find that my mind had very specific images of what needed to be okay. When I tried to meditate my pain away, that I thought that if I could just meditate enough and get more pure spiritually enough, I finally went to my doctor, and I had a homeopath, and he was brilliant. And he looked at me and he said, Lisa, healing happens in relationship. Healing doesn't happen with you trying to fix it, and it doesn't happen with a book trying to add more to it. Healing happens in relationship. And that was a quantum shift for me because all my life I'd been wanting to fix and polish myself as best as possible before I engaged with other people. And then all of a sudden, that's not the case at all. And in retrospect, the people and healers and ideas that illness has led me to have been remarkably healing and all on a path that I never would have chosen, that my mental construct that I was following never would have selected. And so I'm very grateful to this process. I really can feel strongly that I was on a track that was very driven by values that I don't really believe in. And my body made me reevaluate all of what I considered valuable. I really valued myself on the cool things I would do. I had a kind of an interesting career, and I thought that was pretty swanky, and I was swanky because of it. And the more cool things I did in my career, the cooler I was as a person. And then I was like immobile. And like my husband had to do everything. He had to get my kids to school. He had to make the meals. He had to do everything. I contributed nothing. And I still had to find my value. And that was, I think, the hardest part of the whole thing. And I still dip into it. I really want these markers of value to get checked. But the more that I surrender to life as it is and all of our intrinsic value being here, the less I struggle with that false value marker. And that's one of the most exciting developments in all of this for me. So the big piece, and I know that everyone here gets it, the big shift is accepting our body as our teacher and not our jailer. That the body can offer the path towards the unfolding of our most expressed self, right? What's called the entelechy, or the fruition of our potential. And that our mind has all kinds of ideas about what that could be. And for me, I was raised, and the body was kind of a problem on the spiritual path, something to be overcome, something to be um, shunned and subverted in favor of higher ideals. And so turning my attention to my body as my teacher was an enormous shift for me. But it didn't take long to start experiencing the value of it and to experience the openness that was available even in pain. So the first technique I used to surrender to the pain, to allow the pain to be in my body without resisting it, without the pain being a problem. Now, suddenly the pain's going to be a teacher. And how do I relate to this teacher that I've always been trying to run away from? And I tried to release resistance, and that was really, really hard at the beginning because I was very, very constricted. And so I had to just begin by getting curious about the pain itself. So my awareness was directing my attention to the specific physical attributes of the pain. What did it feel like? Was it moving? Was it pulsing? Was it stable? What was the gravity of it? What was the shape of it? And that became fascinating. And the next step is to use my breath to kind of ride the edges of the pain, to try to caress the pain with attention and breath. Because one thing I would notice when I would try to relax on an exhalation, sometimes my pain would stop me. Like that relaxation wasn't really available. And some of these things I noticed, I did yoga for like 25 years, right? And so that was another thing, like, why am I sick? I've taken care of myself in all these ways. And so what I realized was I recognized some of these areas of tension as preceding the pain by a long time. That was something that I would, as I would relax in Shavasana or different, that I would kind of move around it. I would use my breath to shift my relaxation into other places, that I would have these spaces that I would stay away from. And so now, accepting the body as a teacher, I would move towards. And that was very interesting and it daunting. And it really did not take long at all to be able to melt into those places, which was very surprising to me. And the first couple of times, it was unpleasant. But turning the direction in that way, um, I was determined. And so I endured, I don't know how long. I find that most of the time when I have acute pain and I try to move towards it, there are 90 seconds of really intense resistance. Whether it's my mental resistance or just the newness of this pain being experienced in my awareness, I'm not really sure how that goes. But 90 seconds of truly intense sensation. And usually I would get on the other side of it in about that much time. However, sometimes 90 seconds was all I could muster at all. And then I would have to put an ice bag on my head or do whatever pain management technique I was able to use at the time. I've never been able to take painkillers, so I've had to come up with alternate alternate methods, which is mostly ice for me, um, and a few other things that I'll put on the website that I use. Taking the steps for my body to be my teacher and for our bodies to be our teachers, that was the best part of it, because one of the deep frustrations of trying to heal was all of the wonderful stories you would hear about this supplement or that kind of medicine or that didn't work for me, that I would try and give my best effort and it didn't work for me at all. And that was very disappointing. But once I began to have the sensation of my own body as my teacher, it made a lot more sense that each of us is different and each of us is going to have a different experience with any input. And that it shifted the dynamic so that rather than searching for the fix and the solution for my pain, I now began to trust that my body was going to hold my path forward in the pain. And but knowing that healing happens in relationship, the things that lit me up became what I pursued for the fact of lighting me up, not for the fact that I was certain that they were, or even hopeful that they were going to change my state. They were going to enrich the state that I'm in, not fix it or change it or transform it. And so that has been a very nice pivot from no longer expecting things to shift my pain, but I am incorporating into my life the things that bring me joy and potential and relief and hope. We're in such a difficult socio-political time that it's very easy to latch on to the stories that are devastating. But those aren't the only truths, right? So much like for me, I felt initially somewhat victimized by my pain, and that may have, some validity in my worldview as I held it. But it wasn't my only choice. So then the pain becoming a pathway um, is simply a different choice. And I believe, right? So I started really going into body practices and paying attention to the feeling state of my body. And the reason why was because I figured that that which separates us from being a corpse, right, is this enlivenment of the body. The body's felt sense is the first line of communication with that wonder that animates us. So turning my attention to the feeling state of my body again and again and again, and meeting what I find there with openness and curiosity and equanimity to the best of my ability. Not trying to fix or change or transform or interpret. That was the one I probably do still the most. Try to interpret what that pain's trying to tell me. But simply giving it my attention and allowing it to be as it is the most interesting activity I've ever done. I heard about Leonard Cohen, who would go to a Zen monastery outside of LA for years at a time. And he's what I have this Hollywood life that I could live with people moving and everybody kind of, I can't remember the words he used. Everybody jockeying for position to be interesting. But that sitting in a sitting practice was the most interesting time he ever spent. And I believe that as our bodies unfold our messaging, it's certainly the most interesting thing in my life. And part of the reason why is it's non-language based. Like, I'm so addicted to language. I'm so addicted to the mental space and the kind of enthusiasm of being able to communicate in that mental, we both know what each other means by these words, and that creates an environment that's really kind of exciting and fun to participate in. But the attention to the feeling state has no language at all. There's no interest in language, and language is a barrier. Which brings me to an idea I wanted to talk about called focusing. So, in the 70s in Chicago, two noted psychologists realized that they could identify with 100% accuracy who would have the best outcomes in talk therapy. Some talk therapy people go for years and years and years and don't have progress, and some people are able to generate progress in relatively short time. The people who were able to generate progress, they found they could identify easily, first year students could identify, because during the course of their talk therapy, they would stop and check in with their body. They would check to see if what they were saying was really representing what they were feeling. They would check to see if they were just rambling about their story or if they were authentically representing their experience. And that shift was enough to have them develop a whole little field of psychotherapy called focusing. And the methodology of focusing is simply turning the attention inward and saying, hello, I'm listening, and allowing the feelings to come up. And there is a dynamic in focusing that is a relationship between being able to feel a feeling accurately and being able to identify the word for it, so that you could, is it joy? No, it's ecstasy. Is it pain? No, it's strain. Whereas, what's that? And being able to find it. And that they experienced, and if you do focusing, you can experience that when you find the right word, when you find the right encapsulation of the feeling, there's a shift just immediately and just from being noticed. And I just think that that is, I was so happy to read about focusing because it relayed what I've experienced in this gentle shift that comes from being present to the fullness of the sensation and experience of the moment. So I really feel that the struggles that I tried to achieve mental clarity on, as I turn my attention to the feeling state of my body, they shift in a subtle way that doesn't require my mind's participation. And indeed, it seems that my mind has been chewing on a chew toy unnecessarily when this shift, subtle or profound, is available. So I'd like to take a moment and do a little group practice in turning our attention to the feeling state. And so to do that, I invite you to breathe in at the level of your hips in 360 degrees and create an open space within our bodies that on the exhalation we can then relax into. So turning the focus of our attention to the feeling state of our bodies, expanding in 360 degrees at the hips on our inhalation, and relaxing into that space on our exhalation. Noticing that the body is whole, it is complete. And even if we're experiencing a pain or a series of discomforts, those discomforts are existing in a larger whole, and the myriad sensations within. None of them break our wholeness. They're part of our wholeness, the sensations that we feel. And as we can invite and allow any sensation, we can develop an equanimity where resistance used to live. And this is a worthwhile trade-up. When I first started trying to develop equanimity with my pain, I had a visual that I used. So at a certain point in my life, I lived in a lovely house on a lake, and it had a beautiful porch with Adirondack chairs, these deep chairs. And so at the beginning of a practice, I would meet my pain at the door, and escort it in through my house, and sit in an Adirondack chair next to my pain. And sometimes more pain would come. And so sometimes I'd be sitting in my imaginary back porch with 7 or 8 chairs around me, each holding some aspect of my pain, each representing a different aspect of what I was experiencing. And that together we would all just be looking at the lake, me and my pain. And sometimes it was really quite tense on that porch. But eventually it came to a point where it was really quite calming and quite developmentally maturing into a relationship that acknowledged that everyone deserved their say. Every part of me deserved its role in the unfolding of my life. And truly that had been a mental, the realm of the mental prior to that. The mental was in charge, the mental knew what was going on, the mental knew what was needed, and this pain was not needed. This pain was a problem towards this ever march forward towards the goal. So stopping that entirely, stopping that and saying, we're not marching forward towards anything. We're sitting here and we are going to experience the present moment and come into equanimity with the present moment, even if we don't like it. What I began to recognize was that most of my goals were based on mental constructs formed through pain, emotional pain in my childhood. I wanted to achieve this kind of success because that would prove that person wrong. I wanted to achieve this kind of contribution because that would show that what my brother said what didn't mean anything. It was all, I had lots and lots of objectives I was trying to meet, but they were born in hurt. And certainly my contribution in this life wasn't intended to be based in pains. So I now, in retrospect, am thrilled that my body said, whoa, stop the horses. We are not going in this direction. There is another direction. And that direction isn't based on these mental constructs. This direction is based on fully embodying the present moment and being receptive in the subtle channels that you've always been turning off. My body is fluent in the language of all of life, in the language of nature, in the language of the electrons, in the language of the molecules it shares via my breath. And in this space, I access a state of being that allows me to recognize that my wholeness, like my whole drop of water, is one drop in a huge, enormous ocean. That was tremendous. You know, that was the best thing ever. So, as you can see, I am 100% sold on the idea of releasing resistance to pain and to setting ourselves to listen to pain, to be curious about our pain, and to address it not as a problem but as an opportunity. And that's not easy. And it really, I feel, needs a lot of support. And that's why I do regular practices online to try to offer that space of the potentiality of our wellness coming through our relationship with our body shifting, and then our relationship with each other shifting to be supportive in this dynamic of the gifts of the present moment, regardless of what they look like.